Namaskar, this is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. It's a big day in Iran. President Raisi's funeral procession was in Tehran today. World leaders traveled to pay their respects, including men from the Taliban and Hamas. The list itself is a story. As is the turnout, the crowds are a tool for political messaging. Meanwhile, the succession battle has intensified with more names in the fray. We'll tell you all about it. In the Western camp, the divide over Israel is deepening thanks to the possibility of an arrest warrant against Prime Minister Netanyahu. America wants to sanction the international court. In the other war, Russia is flexing its nuclear muscle again, carrying out tactical nuke drills as Europe decides to give Russian money to Ukraine. In Vietnam, they have a third president in 2 years. We'll tell you what's going on there. In Kenya, the president faces backlash for hiring a luxury jet to fly to America. Turbulence hits a Singapore Airlines flight, killing one passenger and injuring many others. The images are scary. Thailand gets back its looted treasure. A 1,000-year-old Shiva statue is returned by a museum. A punishing heat wave is sweeping parts of the world and disrupting life. How can we adapt to this heat? And images from the Pet Gala. I dare say they're better than the Met Gala. All this and more coming up. The headlines first. In a tit-for-tat move, China announces sanctions on U.S. defense firms. Earlier this month, Washington had sanctioned Chinese firms for supporting Russia's war in Ukraine. Beijing has also been upset with the U.S. over its arms sales to Taiwan. Russia's defense ministry proposes to change the country's border in the Baltic Sea. The planned talks of Moscow extending its territorial water from 2025. This will alter Russia's maritime border in the Baltic Sea with Finland and Lithuania. An angry Lithuania summons Moscow's diplomatic envoy. In India, the office of the Home Ministry in Delhi receives a bomb threat email. Nothing suspicious was found during the search operation. This incident is the latest in a spate of hoax bomb threats sent to schools across the country. Hospitals and the airport in the national capital have also been targeted. French President Emmanuel Macron heads to violence-hit New Caledonia. 9 days of riots there have killed 6 people and left hundreds injured. This is the deadliest unrest in New Caledonia in 4 decades. Macron's surprise trip to the French territory is an attempt to defuse the crisis. Chad's Prime Minister submits his resignation to the newly elected junta chief. 2 weeks ago, he was defeated by junta leader Mahamat Deby in the presidential election. Deby will be sworn in on Thursday in the capital. And British lawmaker Craig McKinley receives a standing ovation in Parliament. He was making his first appearance in the House after having his hands and feet amputated due to sepsis. McKinley calls himself the Bionic MP.
وترحم على محمد وآل محمد إن كانوا مسيئين فتجاوز عنهم.
It's a funeral/spectacle, a procession that is also a performance. This is how Iran bids farewell to its leaders. Massive crowds on the streets, people weeping in public and chants of death to America. Yes, there is grief, but there is also political messaging. Let's show you the pictures first. Ebrahim Raisi's funeral procession is covering multiple cities. Yesterday, it was in Tabriz and Qom. Today, it was in Tehran. And the residents of the capital did not disappoint. Tens of thousands of them turned up. They swarmed the open truck that was carrying the coffins. Many of these people offered flowers. Others held up posters of the dead officials. Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei was also present. He personally led the funeral prayers. Beside him was the acting president of Iran. He was weeping as Khamenei repeated the prayers. Take a look.
ترحم على محمد وآل محمد الحين الله أكبر.
Foreign dignitaries also attended, although some of them do not deserve to be called that, like Hamas chief Ismail Haniyeh and the Taliban's foreign minister. Both men led delegations to Tehran. Haniyeh got a personal meeting with Supreme Leader Khamenei. He welcomed him with a hug. Iran's partner countries also sent representatives. Russia's head of parliament, Turkey's vice president, the Prime Minister of Iraq, the Prime Minister of Pakistan, the Vice Premier of China, and the Vice President of India, that's Jagdeep Dhankar. He reached Tehran earlier today and paid his respects to Ebrahim Raisi. Of course, Western countries stayed away. Most of them do not have diplomatic ties with Iran, so they did not send any delegation. Even this short guest list is important. It shows that Iran still has friends, powerful friends. But the regime will be more focused on the domestic attendees, the people of Iran. We've seen this before too. Funerals for top leaders attract thousands of people, often millions. The first instance was in 1989. That's when Iran's first supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, died. Guess how many mourners turned up? According to Iran, 10 million people. That was 1/6 of Iran's population. They turned up to bid farewell to the supreme leader. Another instance was in 2017. Former President Hashemi Rafsanjani died of a cardiac arrest. He was a founding father of the Islamic Republic, so the turnout was massive. Reports say 2 million mourners turned up for him. He was buried next to Khamenei. The third instance was in 2020. Iranian General Qasem Soleimani was killed by the US. Once again, massive turnout. Around 1 million people attended his funeral. Now, all these instances are different. Khamenei was a supreme leader. Rafsanjani was a founding father and president. Soleimani was killed by Iran's great Satan, the US. So there was grief plus anger. And these crowds matter for the Iranian regime. It is not a real democracy. It doesn't hold free and fair elections, so Western countries question its legitimacy, and this is the regime's response. It's like saying, look at the crowd, look at how many Iranians adore and weep for us. But this time there are two questions. One, how big is the turnout? Iran has not released a number yet, but other countries will be watching closely because Raisi's death is different from others. He was not a career politician, he was not killed by the United States, he was not a founding father, nor was he a charismatic cleric. So what if mourners do not turn up in the millions? That's a worry for the Iranian regime. And question number two, is this turnout genuine? Honestly, it's hard to say. Raisi was a hardline conservative politician, and Iranian conservatives do turn up at such events. They're loyal to the regime. Listen in.
It was a very tragic incident for everyone, and especially for the people of the West Asia region, because Mr. Raisi was the symbol of service and devotion for the people.
There will not be a noticeable disruption in the system because of his absence. Even maybe the system can do better in political, international and financial aspects due to this incident and the unity people showed.
But others may have attended out of curiosity or fear. Iran has declared 5 days of mourning. Government offices and schools are shut. So what do people do? Some may have thought might as well attend the funeral. Plus there is fear of reprisals. Some Tehran residents apparently got text messages saying what? That everyone must attend the funeral. And when you get a message like that in Iran, you do not question it. You just do it. The regime has already given strong messages to dissidents. They've been told, do not celebrate. If you do, you will face charges. So I guess the sentiment is mixed. Grief plus fear. But the regime's job is not done yet. The funeral is supposed to signal their popularity. Next, they must signal their stability. Iran's parliament held a special session on Tuesday, and Khamenei has said that operations will not be disrupted. So the message is quite clear. The regime is as strong as ever. Whether that's true or not is a different question altogether. So in public, the regime is presenting a united front. They're signaling that the death of President Raisi has not weakened Iran's leadership or the regime's grip on power. But behind the scenes, it's a completely different story. Power brokers are making swift moves. The infighting has begun. Some regime loyalists are positioning themselves to grab power and win support of the supreme leader. I'm talking about Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. He controls all the levers of power in Iran, from the government to the parliament, the judiciary and Iran's foreign policy. Khamenei controls everything in this country. He also dictates the outcome of Iran's elections. And yes, there is an election, but it's heavily rigged. For starters, not everyone can contest. You need a green light from the supreme leader. He signs off on all the candidates. The voting process is a mere formality. The result is predetermined. It will be the same for the next president. He'll be picked behind closed doors before the voters reach the ballots. So who are the contenders? The list keeps getting longer every day. These are the names we've already told you about. Now, two more names have been added to this list. Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf, the current speaker of Iran's parliament. He ticks the right boxes for the regime. Ghalibaf is a hardliner. He has administrative experience. In the past, he has served as Iran's police chief and Tehran's mayor. More importantly, he is believed to be close to the IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, the powerful and influential armed force. They protect the regime and its power. They report to the supreme leader. If these guards, the IRGC, back Ghalibaf, he has a good chance of becoming president. Another presidential contender is Ali Larijani, again a hardliner. Larijani has served with the Revolutionary Guards. He was also Iran's nuclear negotiator and the son of a famous Ayatollah. Iran's conservatives may find that background appealing. Plus, Larijani has tried his luck in the past. He was stopped from challenging Ebrahim Raisi in 2021. Observers say the regime wanted to give Raisi a clear field, and Larijani lacked charisma as a candidate. But now that Raisi is out of the picture, will he get support this time? Guess we'll have to wait and see. Meanwhile, one candidate seems to be losing support already. That is Saeed Jalili. We told you about him yesterday. Jalili has been a key player in shaping Iran's foreign policy. Like the rest of the candidates, he too is a hardliner. But the conservatives do not really like him. Some of them are trying to block him. They've sent messages to the supreme leader, according to reports. They want to block Saeed Jalili from contesting. But where does the Ayatollah stand? He's unlikely to spell it out in public, especially when his own son is in contention. I'm talking about Mojtaba Khamenei. His name is being widely mentioned, especially in the Western press. He's being called a potential successor, not only to President Raisi, but also to his father, the supreme leader. However, Mojtaba Khamenei faces two significant obstacles. First is his profile. He's never held any public office. He has largely remained away from public life, so he's untested. He may or may not be able to whip up the same level of support as his father. The second challenge is this. Mojtaba's nomination would go against the principles of the Islamic Republic. In 1979, when the Shah was overthrown and the hardliners rose to power in Iran, they declared an Islamic rule. They said it marks an end to the hereditary rule of the Shah. Now, can those same men elevate the son of their leader? It would be very bad optics for the regime, and at a time when they already face a crisis of legitimacy.
System is also suffering from a domestic legitimacy crisis. They have just wrapped up their parliamentary elections, and there was record low public turnout in the second round of voting in Tehran. Only 8% of the population voted. The political establishment is going to put on a brave face.
So it won't be an easy choice for the supreme leader of Iran. He must navigate a tricky minefield. He has to demonstrate stability and ensure a smooth transition. And to complicate matters, the Ayatollah does not have a lot of time. The election is barely 6 weeks away. We'll be tracking this story for you. Let's turn to Israel now. Their Western allies are deeply divided. Over what? The arrest warrant for Benjamin Netanyahu. The warrant has not been issued yet, but prosecutors at the ICC are asking for it. That's the International Criminal Court, the ICC. If issued, this warrant would put Western nations in a tough spot. Some of them do recognize the ICC, like France, Germany, and Italy. So technically, they must arrest Netanyahu on their soil. But the question is, will they? This is where the divisions emerge. France and Germany have supported the ICC, so have countries like Sweden and Denmark. They say rule of law must be followed. But the old Anglosphere gang is against it. I'm talking about Britain and the US. Joe Biden has already rejected the warrant bid, and now Rishi Sunak has joined in. The British Prime Minister says it's an unhelpful development.
Deeply unhelpful development. Of course, it's still subject to a final decision, but it remains deeply unhelpful nonetheless. There is no moral equivalence between a democratic state exercising its lawful right to self-defense and the terrorist group Hamas.
It's not a problem for the US. They do not accept the ICC's jurisdiction, so warrants do not matter to them. In fact, US Republicans are looking to host Prime Minister Netanyahu. They want him to address the US Congress. But for the UK, it's different. They do accept the ICC's jurisdiction. So if a warrant is issued, they will face a tough choice. And Rishi Sunak may have rejected the warrant, but he's not taking on the ICC. He's choosing his words carefully. The US, though, is in full attack mode. Their Congress is considering punitive action against the International Criminal Court. In other words, they want sanctions. But any such move will need President Biden's support. Will the president give it? His top diplomat was asked this question. Listen to his response.
We want to work with you on a bipartisan basis to find an appropriate response. I'm committed to doing that. As you say, the devil's in the details, so let's see what you got, and we can take it from there.
It's not a yes, but it's also not a no, and that is a worrying response from Blinken. He's talking about sanctioning a court, and not just any court, a global court recognized by more than 120 countries. It would be a very dangerous move, although not an unprecedented one. Let me take you back to 2002. The US Congress passed a similar legislation. It was nicknamed the Hague Invasion Act. The Hague is where the ICC is located. And what did this law say? That the US must use, and I'm quoting, any means necessary to free US leaders from the Hague. Suppose a US politician is arrested or a US general is being prosecuted, then Washington can even use force to free him. Hence the nickname, the Hague Invasion Act. So the US does have bad blood with the ICC, but this time it's a lot more complicated. For starters, the ICC is not prosecuting American leaders, they're chasing Israeli leaders. Secondly, many Americans agree with the warrant or the warrant bid. Let me show you what happened at a congressional hearing. Senator Lindsey Graham was speaking to Antony Blinken. He said if warrants are issued for Netanyahu, then US leaders would be next. Listen to how the crowd responded.
We, hopefully, together will find a way to register our displeasure with the ICC, because if they'll do this to Israel, we're next. This group tried to come after our soldiers. Yeah, you can clap all you want to.
They started clapping. It tells you what US public opinion is. And that should worry Benjamin Netanyahu. In the short run, this warrant bid could benefit him. Joe Biden is supporting him again. Even his domestic rivals have offered support. But what about the long run? Just look at the charges against Netanyahu. Starvation of civilians, intentional attack on civilians, and murder/extermination. These are crimes against humanity. If proven, it could further destroy Israel's credibility. It could make Israel a pariah. In fact, it's already happening. 3 European nations have decided to recognize Palestine as a country: Ireland, Spain, and Norway. The announcement was made today. It will be implemented on the 28th of May. Listen to how the Spanish leader justified his move.
And if one thing is clear to me, it is that Prime Minister Netanyahu has no peace project for Palestine. Fighting the terrorist group is legitimate and necessary after the events of October 7th. But Netanyahu is creating so much pain and so much destruction and so much rancor in Gaza and the rest of Palestine that the viability of two-state solution is in serious danger.
Does this change anything? On the ground, no. Palestine still doesn't have its own territory, so by extension, it's not a country. But politically, this is significant. It shows how isolated Israel is becoming. They're lashing out at these 3 countries. Israel's ambassadors have been recalled from there, so Netanyahu is in no mood to climb down. But can he afford this isolation? The US too has carried out many crimes against humanity, but the US has a huge economy and a big military. So no one wants to isolate them. Israel cannot risk that. It's not America. It's a point that we made before in Russia's context. A war is not just about military wins, it's also about political wins. Right now, Israel is winning on the battlefield, but it's losing the political war. Speaking of Russia, Vladimir Putin has ordered new drills. Not your routine ones. This drill involves tactical nuclear weapons. So the stakes are very high, and so are the political implications. The drills are taking place in Russia's southern military district. It shares a border with Ukraine. Yesterday was the first stage of the drill, the preparation. This involves a lot of important steps like loading fake warheads to launch vehicles, driving to the launch site, and also loading missiles on warplanes. Take a look at this. A couple of questions here. 1, what are these tactical nukes? And 2, why is Russia practicing with them now? There are 2 types of nuclear weapons, tactical and strategic. Strategic weapons are your big bombs. They can destroy entire cities. But tactical weapons are like mini nukes, powerful but targeted. They cannot wipe out an entire city, but they can cause considerable damage. Most of these tactical weapons were built during the Cold War. Russia is said to have around 2,000 of them, and the US less than 200. The Americans gradually stopped making tactical nukes, but Russia is still holding on to them. Which brings us to the second question. Why is Moscow holding this drill now? This is what the Defense Ministry is saying, and I'm quoting, to ensure the territorial integrity and sovereignty of the Russian state in response to provocative statements and threats of individual Western officials against the Russian Federation. It's not a surprise. Putin has always timed his nuclear rhetoric. First, in late February 2022, Putin placed his nuclear forces on high alert. This was just after the invasion began, so the idea was to deter any Western intervention. In March 2023, that is last year, he did it again. Putin said he would place nuclear weapons in Belarus. Again, the timing was key. It came just before Ukraine's counteroffensive, and finally, this tactical nuclear drill. Some 3,000 Russian soldiers are part of it. They're mainly using 2 Russian missiles, Iskander and Kinzhal. Both can carry tactical nuclear warheads. So it's a clear warning to the West. We've heard some escalatory comments from European leaders, especially from France and Britain. President Macron keeps talking about sending troops to Ukraine. He said the same thing earlier this month. The UK too is stepping up the rhetoric. Their foreign secretary made an important statement this month. He said Ukraine can use Western weapons to strike inside Russia. And this is a shift. Because initially the West only allowed defensive use. But now they say you can attack inside Russia. Plus, you have new weapons coming. The US has finally approved a new military package for Ukraine. It's worth almost $61 billion. Those weapons could hit the battlefield soon, which explains Vladimir Putin's decision. It's very unlikely that he will actually use tactical nukes, but the threat itself is enough. The question is, how will the West respond? They've criticized the nuclear drills, but they're not in the mood to back down. In fact, they have found new ways to fund Ukraine's war. How? By making Russia pay for it. Let me explain how this works. When Putin invaded Ukraine, the G7 froze Russian assets. The G7 is the group of 7 Western economies. They froze Russian assets, like gold and foreign exchange. It was worth almost $300 billion. This is Russian money. Now, these assets are generating money, either through profits or through interest, $300 billion. So the European Union is giving these profits to Ukraine. 90% of it for military aid, 10% for other demands. And how much money would that be? Between $16 and $21 billion by 2027. The first payment is expected by July. Russia is obviously fuming at Europe. A Kremlin spokesperson called it theft.
Even this reduced option is nothing more than expropriation, because all those revenues are revenues from our assets. And transferring them to other purposes is also a violation of all the rules and norms of the international financial economic system.
Hard to argue with that. This money is not Putin's personal wealth. It belongs to the Russian people. So what gives Europe the right to appropriate it? The United Nations has not approved this move. Neither has any global body. It's a unilateral decision by Brussels. So Russia is responding in kind. They have seized assets of 2 German banks, Deutsche Bank and Commerzbank. Both these moves will undermine trust in the global financial system. It will weaken investor confidence. But Russia and the West don't seem to care about that at the moment. They're going by the old adage, all's fair in war. Our next story is from Vietnam. The country has a new president. His name is To Lam. Now, Vietnam is a one-party state, so there are no elections. The country is run by the Communist Party. It's a lot like China. The main leader is the party general secretary. No one is above him, not even the country's president. The main decisions are taken by a Politburo. It has 16 members. To Lam was nominated by the Communist Party. Then there was a secret ballot. Lam was the only candidate on this ballot. The National Assembly voted on his nomination. It unanimously approved his election. It's basically standard procedure here. Then why is this election making so much news? It's because of Vietnam's politics. To Lam is the 3rd president in 2 years. The 3rd in 2 years, the other 2 had to resign because of an anti-corruption drive. It was ordered by the Communist Party. Over the years, it has involved thousands of officials, from low-level bureaucrats to even presidents. No one was spared. The first president to fall was Nguyen Xuan Phuc. There were rumors that he would be sacked, but he resigned before that. Then came Vo Van Thuong. He was the youngest president in Vietnam's history. He was quite close to the party chief. He looked like the perfect choice, but he did not last. The anti-corruption drive got to him. He had to resign. And now we have To Lam, who also happens to be the man who led the anti-corruption drive. He was the deputy head of that committee. He has played a central role, and that seems to have propelled him to a top position. Now the question is, can he go further? I ask because Vietnam has 4 main political positions. Like I told you, the first and the most important one is the General Secretary, the be-all and end-all of the system, the party General Secretary. Then there's the Prime Minister, the President and the Speaker. They're all called 4 pillars of Vietnam's politics. And among these, the position of the President is mostly ceremonial. It's like a rubber stamp leader. but it's also a stepping stone to become the chief of the Communist Party. Right now, the Secretary General is Nguyen Phu Trong. He's 80 years old. He took the position in 2011. This is his third 5-year term. It ends in 2026. He may even step down before that. So the Communist Party in Vietnam is looking for a successor. The previous president, Vo Van Thuong, was seen as a top contender, but now with his downfall, the race is wide open. And the new president, Lam, can capitalize on that. He can try for the party chief's job. But internal political drama aside, this musical chair in politics is new for Vietnam. Traditionally, this has been a cautious nation. There are no sudden changes. Political transitions are well planned. The focus has always been on stability. So 3 presidents in 2 years is quite strange for them. And it is raising concerns among investors. You see, in 1986, Vietnam was one of the poorest nations in the world. Then came economic reforms. The country focused on growth. It soon became a middle-income economy, and that turned it into a prominent investment destination. As companies move away from China, their first choice is becoming Vietnam. That has been the case for years now. It had a fast-growing middle class, salaries were lower than China, it was also politically stable, and the government was investing heavily in manufacturing. So Vietnam ticked all the right boxes. But the recent political turmoil could derail that. There could be bureaucratic paralysis. It could spook investors. Businesses may think twice before moving to the country. These are all real concerns. So while an anti-corruption crackdown sounds good on paper, it could also potentially work against Vietnam. The country has some lofty goals. Vietnam wants to become a developed nation by 2025, but it cannot do that by driving away business. Now let's tell you about a nightmare at 37,000 feet. Yes, we're talking about that Singapore Airlines flight where chaos erupted. You may have seen the videos already. It was sheer horror. The plane was flying from London to Singapore. It suddenly encountered extreme turbulence. Within 3 minutes, the aircraft dropped over 6,000 feet. The freak weather tore through the plane's interior. Bags were falling out of the overhead cabins. 1 passenger died on the flight and dozens of others were injured. Here is the full story.
This plane looks like it's been through an earthquake. The entire cabin is in disarray. The ceiling has been ripped open. Masks are dangling. Overhead compartments have dents. There's blood on a passenger's face as well as on some of the seats. These passengers have lived through a nightmare. They were cruising at 37,000 feet when suddenly their plane was hit by extreme turbulence.
I think the entire thing happened within the span of like less than 10 seconds. Like it was really, really quick.
That's Zafran Azmir. He was on board this flight. When the plane took off from London, everything seemed fine. But about 10 hours into the flight, all hell broke loose.
If I remember correctly, I think the seatbelt signs were off. There were people within the lavatories and the crew that were working. But I saw people from across the aisle just like going completely horizontal, hitting the ceiling and landing back down in like really awkward positions. People getting massive gashes in their head, concussions.
There were over 200 passengers on board. Turbulence is quite common while flying, but no one can prepare for a freak incident like this one. The passengers were having breakfast. That's when the plane took a dive. It dropped by over 6,000 feet in just 3 minutes. The flight was supposed to land in Singapore, but the severe turbulence forced the pilot to divert the plane to Bangkok. Everyone realized the full extent of the damage only after the plane landed. Passengers were thrown out of their seats. Many of them had gashes on their heads. 73-year-old Jeff Kitchen was among those passengers too. Unfortunately, he didn't survive the ordeal.
Immediate kind of disbelief at first, and then the plane felt very level, and it was obvious the gentleman needed some help, so I got up and helped some other passengers get him out of his seat, and we laid him on the floor near the bulkhead so that the medics on the aeroplane, there were some passengers who thankfully were medics, could administer CPR to the gentleman on the aeroplane. They gave CPR for I think about 20 minutes or so.
Kitchen died on the plane, presumably after he suffered a heart attack. The airline has issued an apology, and the government of Singapore has started a probe.
On behalf of Singapore Airlines, I would like to express my deepest condolences to the family and loved ones of the deceased. We are very sorry for the traumatic experience.
But everyone is looking for answers. How could this have happened? While turbulence goes hand in hand with flying, such extreme cases are quite rare. But experts say that they are becoming more frequent, and they are blaming climate change.
Over the last 40 years, severe turbulence has increased by 55%, moderate turbulence by 37%, and slight turbulence or light turbulence by about 17%. So as the weather changes, certainly it is getting more turbulent.
Aircraft are capable of withstanding extreme weather, but the weather is an unpredictable force. Singapore's report will help bridge some of our knowledge gaps. But until then, the best thing passengers can do is to keep their seatbelt on throughout the flight.
Hello, sir. Could you share a few words with us? Hello. Our next story is about Kenya, about their president, William Ruto, who is on a state visit to the US. It's the first state visit by a Kenyan president in over 2 decades, the first since 2003. It's also the first time in 16 years that an African leader is on a US state visit. So it is quite significant, but that's not what it's making news for. President Ruto is being slammed, not because he's in the US, but because of how he chose to get there. He decided to fly in a luxury jet. He chartered a Boeing 737-700 business jet from an Emirati company, the Royal Jet Group. He hired it for about 200 million Kenyan shillings. That's $1.5 million US. Ruto pulled out all the stops. He brought along an entourage of more than 30 people, which includes a famous Kenyan comedian. Everyone traveled to the US in style on the Kenyan taxpayers' dime, and this, more than anything else, has triggered the backlash. Now, some of you may wonder, what is the big deal here? After all, world leaders travel all the time. It's part of the job description. They need to travel to build relations and to negotiate trade deals. In the long run, the trip should more than pay for itself. And all of this may be true. And it's exactly what Ruto is using as his defense. But that has not helped quell public anger. Why? Because of Ruto's policies. He's been tough on Kenyan taxpayers. He became president in 2022 and he has been increasing taxes ever since. Ruto has increased the tax rate on salaries. He has doubled the sales tax on fuel. He has introduced a housing levy, a hospital insurance levy, and a turnover tax on small businesses. If it moves, Ruto taxes it. All in the name of fiscal responsibility. Kenya has a mountain of national debt. It was worth over $51 billion as of last December. Ruto had pledged to fix this. That is why he keeps raising taxes. And obviously, this is not a popular move. It puts an added burden on Kenyan citizens who are already struggling with the cost of living crisis and the rising cost of essential food items. In this situation, imagine hearing that your president is flying around in an Emirati jet. The same president who's been raising your taxes, who's been preaching austerity. That same president is taking more than 30 people, including a comedian, to the US. So you can see why the Kenyan people are angry. And this is not the first time, apparently. A few months ago, Ruto was dubbed Kenya's flying president. He has been on more than 50 foreign trips since he took office in 2022, more than 3 every month on average. In the year up to July 2023, he'd spent about $9.2 million on travel, both domestic and international, 9.2 million. Now, this latest US trip alone will cost Kenya $1.5 million. For all the talk about austerity, Ruto's expenses just seem to be growing. So to calm the public down, he needs to have something to show for all of this, which is why this US trip needs to bear fruit. Ruto will have his official meeting with Joe Biden tomorrow. They're supposed to discuss a number of issues ranging from troop deployments in Haiti to extending a free trade agreement. Kenya's trade minister says that they have prepared more than 30 bankable projects. They're worth over $20 billion. Ruto will pitch these to American investors. If he can land a big deal, people may forget about the luxury jet. If not, he could be in trouble. Now let's turn to Thailand. Yesterday there was a celebration because two ancient Thai statues made their way home. One of them is a 4-foot-tall bronze figure believed to depict the Hindu god Shiva. It is known as the Golden Boy or the Standing Shiva. The other statue is called the Kneeling Lady. Both these figures are about 1,000 years old. They're both considered masterpieces, but about 50 years ago, they were looted and smuggled out of Thailand. It may not surprise you to learn that there was some British involvement in this looting. The statues eventually made their way to the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, where they've been for decades. But finally, the Met decided to do the right thing. Yesterday, they actually returned the statues to Thailand. Our next report has the details.
The gilt bronze figure of the Hindu god Shiva displayed before you here today is without doubt a singular masterpiece, one of the most important religious sculptures of its kind to survive from mainland Southeast Asia.
That was John Guy, curator in the Department of Asian Art at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City. He was in Thailand yesterday, bringing back some long-lost treasures. Two bronze statues, both almost 1,000 years old. One of them is called the Kneeling Lady. It depicts a woman with her hands folded in prayer. The other statue, the one the Met curator was talking about, is called the Standing Shiva or the Golden Boy. It is about 129 centimeters or 4 feet tall. It has two names because there are two theories about what the statue depicts. The Met and most others believe that the statue depicts a god, the Hindu god Shiva. 1,000 years ago, Hinduism was a dominant religion in Southeast Asia. The region is home to numerous ancient Hindu temples and statues. The Standing Shiva statue may be one of them. The second theory is that the statue depicts a king, the Khmer king Jayavarman VI. He reigned between 1080 AD and 1107 AD, approximately when the statue was created. So it's possible that it depicts him as well. Whatever the case, the statue is still a masterpiece, a priceless artifact that belongs to the people of Thailand. But about 50 years ago, the statue was taken from them. A woman said she found the figure in 1974. While digging for sweet potatoes. She says she took it to the police, who directed her to Thailand's capital, Bangkok. There, she sold the priceless statue to a foreigner for about $33,000. Eventually, the statue wound up at the Met Museum a few years later. The Met had the statue in their collection from 1988 till last year. That's when they decided to return it.
The Met initiated the return of these two objects after reviewing information and established that the works rightly belonged to the Kingdom of Thailand. This return followed the launch of the Met's Cultural Property Initiative last year, an initiative driven by the Met's commitment to the responsible collecting of antiquities and to the shared stewardship of the world's cultural heritage.
The Met discovered that the statue was linked to a man called Douglas Latchford. He was a British antique collector and dealer. Over the years, he sold numerous South Asian artifacts to museums around the world. He was accused of smuggling artifacts for years, but he wasn't formally charged or indicted until 2019. But before the case could progress, Latchford died in 2020. His family still denies any wrongdoing. But the Met Museum seems to have seen the light.
On behalf of the Thai government and all Thai people, I'd like to express gratitude that these two important artifacts have returned home. These artifacts that Thailand has received from the Met are the national assets of all Thais.
While the story has a happy ending, it still took far too long for justice to prevail. and there are still thousands of artifacts lying around in Western museums. Priceless heritage which was stolen by colonizers. Thailand's story should be an inspiration to the rest of the global south. Because there's still a lot of loot left that needs to be returned.
Now let's turn our attention to India, where millions are huddling indoors during the day. And entire neighborhoods are turning into ghost towns. India is sizzling under one heat wave after another. Today, the Weather Bureau issued a fresh warning, a red alert across North India, where temperatures may breach the 47 degrees Celsius mark. That is shockingly hot. Enough to roast papad or crackers in the sand. Yet, it is not surprising. Extreme heat has become the new normal, not just in India, but the world over. And reality check, we are not prepared for this kind of heat. So we are definitely not prepared for the heat of tomorrow. Let me explain. For thousands of years, climate has fluctuated within a narrow band, on average somewhere around 13 degrees Celsius. Humans have learned to live with it, so have crops and livestock. Crucial systems like our infrastructure have been designed within those constraints. But now temperatures are rising. The 8 years between 2015 and 2022 were the hottest on record. Then 2023 broke that record. In all likelihood, so will this year, 2024. So humans, plants, animals or systems, none of them are functioning normally, and heat is distorting daily life. It is changing the way people live and the way they work. People who work outdoors are the worst affected. So they're working shorter shifts or working overnight, which is dangerous in itself. Employees who work indoors are relatively safer, but their routines are changing dramatically. Companies are increasingly reducing work hours. Such a shift is important, but at a society-wide level, that means productivity takes a hit. Projects are taking longer to get done, and doing anything else like working a second job or taking care of family is getting more difficult because personal life is also affected in more ways than you can imagine. Life is moving indoors, so children rarely play outdoors. Athletes are altering their training and people are jogging inside malls. Even animals in zoos are moving inside air-conditioned cages. But most animals do not have that luxury and face a fate similar to these monkeys in Mexico. They're falling dead from trees due to the heat, because heat is a selective killer. And the inequality is not limited to humans. Even so, heat can affect everyone in hidden ways. It kills crops, making it, if not difficult, then very expensive to put food on the table. Heat is hampering sleep. Hot nights are associated with high mortality. And this is hardly the only health risk. Heat is a silent and deadly killer. Heat waves kill more people than any other natural hazard. People are dying of dehydration and organ failure, which is the worst case, of course. Then there are the less obvious problems: dizziness, nausea, burning eyes, confusion, irritability. Heat is also altering your brain health. It is hampering everything from memory to language to formation of identity and exacerbating brain disorders. Plus life-threatening diseases like dengue and malaria. They're spreading faster. Extreme heat affects every single aspect of your life. But before you envisage a dystopian future with famines, conflicts and mass migrations, let's ask ourselves this: what can we do about this heat? Is there a way to cope? Scientists have a two-tiered answer. Their first solution is mitigation, undoing the damage, reversing the clock. This is important and it must continue, but this is also a long-term process. So right now, we can focus on the second approach, adaptation, meaning accepting the new reality and shifting gears, adapting to a warmer world. It is different from surviving other ails of climate change. You can run from hurricanes. You can buy wildfire insurance, but heat is different. It blankets all of us, but affects each one of us differently. So the solutions have to be tailor-made, like building heat tolerance, getting fitter, changing school and work timings, dipping our feet in cold water, or painting our roofs white. Big or small, we need to get cracking on solutions, both at a personal and at a civic level, because we cannot change the past. So at the very least, we can be present to avoid a future of cats on hot bricks. For our last story, let's talk about fashion's biggest night. I'm not talking about the Met Gala, I'm talking about the Pet Gala. Furry, four-legged fashionistas strutting down the red carpet in bespoke outfits. What's not to like? But pet fashion is not just limited to one event. It's a booming industry. And leading the wave are pet parents. It seems they will invest anything from customized collars to luxury Tiffany feeding bowls. It's a $5 billion industry. Our next report tells you more.
The first Monday in May is an important day in fashion. It's the day of the Met Gala. From a glittering display of avant-garde fashion to celebrity sightings on the red carpet, it's a grand event. But for those who know, it's not the true pinnacle of couture. That happens on the third Monday, the day of the Pet Gala. Imagine chic canines strutting on the red carpet, each donning a dress that's a meticulous recreation of a look from the 2024 Met Gala. From French bulldogs in feathered frocks to Pomeranians in sequined suits, these four-legged models were ready to strut, and the paparazzi howled in delight. Clearly, the event is a bark in the right direction.
I've made 15 garments celebrating because I want people to understand that we're not making fun of the Met Gala, we're not mimicking the Met Gala, we're elevating and appraising and appreciating the wonderful designs that were presented at the Met Gala by the most talented designers of the world.
And the man behind this is Anthony Rubio. He's a renowned figure in the world of pet fashion. Back in 2013, Rubio embarked on a whimsical photo project. Each year, he would recreate some of the most iconic looks from the Met Gala. His models would be furry fashionistas. But this year, the project has leapt from Instagram fame to the gilded halls of a museum, transcending mere internet whimsy to become a bona fide event.
I've been working on them tirelessly. It started off with 15, and then in the last few days, a few more came in, and all the garments were already sold. And that money is all going to finance the Museum of the Dog.
But it's not just the Pet Gala that's championing pet fashion. It's the new it thing. The pet clothing market is worth around $5 billion. By 2030, it will be worth more than $7 billion. And the reason behind that are pet parents. They are buying it all, from bow ties to luxury harnesses. And fashion brands are jumping on this trend. From H&M to Hermes, everyone has a pet line. Since 2019, the sales of pet clothes have grown by 21%. Owners now spend 9% more than they used to on pet clothes. So which animal has the biggest closet? Well, it's dogs. They make up for 60% of the market. So it's not surprising that the Pet Gala showcased that. Looks like the joy of fashion can be shared by all, even our four-legged friends. So here's to the inaugural Pet Gala, where fashion, at least for one glorious night, truly goes to the dogs.
It's a wonderful note to end on. And now it's time for Vantage shots, images that tell the story. The UK erects sand sculptures of soldiers on a beach ahead of D-Day landings. In the United States, billions of buzzing cicadas emerged thanks to a rare event not seen in centuries. And welcome aboard Bark Air, a canine-friendly flight that transports dogs from New York to Los Angeles. Finally, we are taking you back in history. On this day in 1972, Richard Nixon landed in Moscow for a summit with Soviet leaders. He was the first US president to visit the Soviet Union. It was a step towards conciliation during the Cold War. During this trip, America and the USSR, the Soviet Union, reached a number of agreements on space cooperation. We're leaving you on that note. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
Hello. In a world where hellos are as diverse as the emojis on your phone keyboard, it seems elephants are giving humans a run for their linguistic money. Move over hello, as there is a new greeting guru in town, and they have got trunks. According to a recent study by the Jafuta Reserve in Zimbabwe, elephants have been caught red-handed or red-trunked. They were observed engaging in a symphony of greetings in the reserve, from ear flapping to trunk reaching. These gentle giants are pulling out all the stops.
We had seen that when they separated and reunited, elephants used a lot of different movements. They flapped their ears, they spread their ears, they reached with the trunk. And we wanted to know which of these were directed. So if they would use more visual gestures when the recipient was looking at them, or gestures that make a sound when they weren't.
The researchers kept a close eye on 9 elephants, 4 females and 5 males in a semi-captive state. They were allowed to go wild and free during the day. However, at night they were kept in stables. But hold on to your tusks, as this is not just a visual spectacle. It is a multi-sensory extravaganza. The elephants have at least 20 types of gestures. They meet each other with sounds like rumbles, roars and trumpets, adding some serious flair to their already impressive repertoire. There's also a difference between how female and male elephants greet each other. Female elephants have bond groups. Studies show that when different groups meet each other in the wild, they engage in elaborate greeting ceremonies. The male elephants have weaker social bonds. Researchers call their meet and greet a risky reunion. It's a hostile interaction. They mainly meet by smelling each other. So, smell plays an important role in the world of elephant greetings. Who needs a fancy cologne when you've got secretions from a unique gland? Elephants use this unique gland to urinate, defecate, and secrete. It's the elephant equivalent of a signature scent, minus the overpriced bottles.
And they also often used defecation, urination, and had temporal gland secretions, which could be because of the excitement of seeing each other, but could also be because elephants rely extensively on olfaction.